And then when you're not presenting, you can mute yourselves by clicking on that green microphone icon by your name. Just don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay. Now, will people be able to hear us when they join before it starts or not?
I'll let you know. Like right now, the only people who can join the audio or hear the audio are you all, the panelists, and the organizer, myself. But as soon as I start the broadcast, which I'll do right at 2:00, you'll be able to hear us. But I'll give you a warning that it's happening, and that's when I'll start the recording as well. And actually, did you want to go through this and just make sure it looked okay? I had to I had to adjust some of the formatting because the webinar system kind of cuts off the very bottom of the screen. So I moved some things up. I just want you to kind of maybe click through and make sure it all looks okay.
Okay, so
Sorry, the beginning part.
and is who's gonna do the? Are you doing the beginning part or is Aaron?
I was going to do the very beginning, and as soon as she joined, I was going to ask her if she wanted to introduce both of you or if she wanted me to do all three of you. That's going to be her choice. But then after I do the intro or hers or everyone's, then I'll turn it over to her. And then she said she has some other intro, and then I guess she'll turn it over to you, is how I understand it.
That sounds good. All right, I think that works well.
Great. And Megan, do yours look okay as well? Fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're good.
Awesome.
Are y'all doing anything fun this summer?
Not too fun for me.
I'm actually at the beach right now, so minor in North Carolina. So after this, I'm going outside.
Which North Carolina beach?
Nag's Head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in Eastern North Carolina.
Oh, so. Awesome! That's awesome. That's my first time here. It's really nice.
It is nice.
If Aaron's having any issues. I'm going to email Erin and see if she's having any issues joining. I'll be right.
Megan, I thought of you. We had a presenter from ETS come and speak to us about the GRE about a month or two ago.
Oh, that's cool. How'd your faculty like it?
It was at the university level. It was more widely attended by staff than by faculty. But
yeah, I just wanted to know if like the reviewers watched or like the grad school reviewers.
But some of them did. But
yeah.
It was mainly what seemed like it was mostly staff who organized the application. So, but one of the things, and I'm sure you probably had heard of this, but they were talking about in the application putting the GRE scores lower on the application. So they're one of the last things people see when looking at it.
So. Once you see them, you kind of gotta make your opinion.
Yeah, you can't unsee them.
Right. Crazy. That's a good recommendation.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
I know it's one of the first things that if we thumb through, we see it. But I've known people that read and they don't look at the first slide first. They always start at the back.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Hi guys, sorry I was running late.
Oh, no problem. Welcome. This is Sarah, by the way.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Great. So you sound good, and I've already kind of through this with Johnson and Meghan, but I am going to kind of do the very beginning. How we've done the questions in the past is everyone's muted except for obviously you all, and they'll just submit their questions via the question box, and I can read those and deliver those at the end of the presentation or anywhere along the way that seems to be a good place for questions. I know that you all can't see the questions being submitted right now, but Erin, since you're moderating, if you'd like me to make sure that you see them, I can certainly make those available to you if you prefer.
Yeah, I'm fine with you taking the lead on that, and I'll try to take notes for any kind of follow-up that we may need to do or if I need to clarify anything. But yeah, that would be great.
Perfect. Okay. And then I was going to just state the learning objectives quickly, introduce you because I have a short bio for you. I also have short bios for Johnson and Meghan, and I can share those, or I can introduce you, then turn it over to you to introduce them. It's up to you.
I would say go ahead and introduce everyone since you have all that information, and then I'll just talk about kind of, further intentions of why we're doing this presentation and the history, but I'll keep it brief.
Perfect. So I'll do this part, and then do you want me to hand it over? Then I'll hand it over to you here. And what you do, I'm giving you the keyboard and mouse. So all you have to do is click into the presentation to activate your power, and then click again to advance the slide.
Okay, got it. And then to transition over to Johnston so he can navigate through the presentation. Do I need to do anything?
I'll just transfer it to him.
Okay, because I'm just going to use this slide as my talking points, and then I'm done.
Oh, okay. So maybe if you're okay,
I really don't need.
I won't give it to you. I'll just kind of advance to the slide and then say thank you, and you do your thing, and then I'll just listen for the cue and give Johnston the controls as soon as you're finished. Great.
Yeah, easy.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Erin, my supervisor said that you did a great job presenting in Louisville. Did you present?
Oh, yeah. Tracy asked me to present on orientation.
Yeah.
It was a lot of information. I felt like I was talking to students, but I tried to put a lot in there just as a reference point. So anyone that actually has a copy of the presentation, I mean, there'll be a lot of resources there. But thanks for that feedback. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, she said it was great. I mean, it was she was just telling us about the event, and she mentioned your name. I was like, wait a minute, I know the person is that.
Yeah. No, guys should be circulating. I have my presentation, then I have the one that I did with Misty and Brittany back in April, May. Everything's a blur right now. So he should be sending that out soon, so you all have it. But yeah, it was a great retreat. I highly recommend it.
Erin, did you participate in any of the other activities? Did you go to the track?
I did.
Nice.
It was so cool. I did not know Churchill Downs was that big.
Yeah.
And jokingly told people, I mean, my only experience with horse racing, because it's not that big in Texas, is we have a pretty small track in San Antonio where I grew up that was like dollar beer, dollar hot dog night. So that was kind of my expectations going into that.
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, instead we're like in Millionaires Row with a full buffet, open bar, and the whole 9 yards. It was really, really, it was a treat.
That's great. Good. I'm glad you all had good weather too.
Yeah, it rained a little bit on and off, but probably after the first race it stopped raining, and it was really fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you see the giant bat?
No.
Oh, wow, you really missed out. No, the Louisville Slugger Museum is there, and there's like literally a giant baseball Louisville Slugger outside of the art museum. It's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of time to venture out. It was really just
pretty packed.
and then I flew right back out.
Yeah.
So, time. It's a fun city. We walked just a little bit around the hotel, mainly to get to the convenience store, but there was a lot of neat shops down there too.
Yeah. And I told Meghan that we have about 70 registered for today. So.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm sorry again about yesterday. I just lost track of time. In all honesty, I'm at the beach this week, so I totally I wasn't had my phone on me, and I didn't get my alarm reminder, so I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
And we'll be able to see who's in attendance aside from ourselves, right?
No, but I can certainly send you the list during or after, I guess, if you prefer.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I was just curious to see if anybody from Rollins was coming. That's all.
Oh, nice. I actually don't have the list in front of me, but
it's actually, you don't even have. It's not a problem.
I can report back. And then afterwards, so this will be the recording of the webinar will be posted on our website along with the PDF of the slides, and they'll get an email when that's available, which I'm automatically sending it on Friday. So those who attend and also those who register and aren't able to attend today, they'll get the info.
Great.
We'll get started right in 4 minutes.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
didn't get to tell you, but you can mute yourself by clicking on the green microphone icon by your name when you're not presenting. And then just please don't forget to unmute yourself.
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, I have 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Any last questions or anything that you need from me?
I'm all set.
I'm good to go.
All right, great. Thanks, guys. Here we go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Weiner, Program Manager of Education and Practice at the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health. Thank you for joining us for today's ASPPH Presents webinar, Student Services Spotlight on Holistic Admission. Today's webinar will be 1 hour in length. We'll begin with a short introduction of our presenters, followed by their presentation, allowing time at the end for questions and discussion. The webinar is part of the 2018 ASPPH Presents series and eligible for 1 hour of CPH continuing education credit. 2 housekeeping items of note. While you are in listen-only mode and your lines have been muted, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar using the question box. We will address those most likely at the end unless there is a pertinent question submitted at the moment. And now I am pleased to, our learning objectives, as you all know when you registered, are to understand the meaning and importance of holistic review, identify the successes and challenges of your admissions and review process, and describe the benefits of holistic review to faculty and deans. Today's presenters, our moderator today is Erin Schneider, who currently serves as the Director of Student Affairs at Texas A&M School of Public Health. In this role, she provides resources and services to support the academic, professional, and personal growth of undergraduate and graduate students in the Scholars Public Health and Health Administration programs. Erin currently serves as ASPPH Student Services Chair-elect and is a member of the Student Services Leadership Section. Johnston King is the Enrollment Management Coordinator at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Gillings School of Global Public Health. Johnson develops and implements program enrollment management plans, hosts recruitment events, and leads graduate student recruitment. Johnson serves on the SOFAS Recruitment Advisory Committee and received the 2017 NAGAP Pre-Conference Institute Fellowship. Johnson, you'll have to correct me if I did not pronounce that correctly. Meghan Sullivan serves as an Associate Director of Academic Programs in the Department of Behavioral Sciences and Health Education at the Rollins School of Public Health of Emory University, where she leads the department's applicant review process and advises students from the point of interest through graduation. Additionally, she is a member of the admissions committee at New York University, where she reviews undergraduate applications. She has spent the entirety of her career in higher education and has experience participating in the admissions process at a wide range of institutions and programs. Thank you all for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to Erin.
Yeah, and welcome everyone. I'm proud to host this session with Johnston and Meghan. For those of you who may be familiar with this information, this was a presentation given at the ASPPH meeting this past March. We received such great feedback that we asked Johnston and Meghan to present again, so you guys are in for a treat. For those of you who had heard this is a great opportunity to continue processing the information and ask more in-depth questions. And for those of you who are new, I really think you'll find this information valuable in improving your admissions within your own school or program. We'll have opportunity for Q&A at the end of the presentation. I'll be taking notes along with Sarah, so if there's any additional questions that we're unable to address during the presentation today, I'll be sure to follow up via either Sarah, Tracy, or Emily and get that information to you all. But without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Johnston and we'll get started.
All right, good afternoon. It's a nice warm day here in Chapel Hill, so I'm excited to be inside talking about admissions and holistic admissions with you all. Here at UNC Gillings, we have a decentralized hybrid model for admissions between centralized and decentralized. Some functions of the admissions process are done centrally at the school. Some functions are done centrally at the university, and we also have most of the admissions functions are done within the programs. So at Gillings, I get to work with the enrollment management planning portion of the admissions process for our prospective students in our programs. And so within enrollment management planning, holistic admissions is extremely important, and we were going to talk about that today. So when talking with faculty and staff about enrollment management planning, we usually kind of frame the conversation by going over 3 stages of the admissions funnel theory, defining what is enrollment management planning. Because if you're like me and you love enrollment management planning, you probably can't get enough of it, but it's funny to find out that not everybody feels the same way. So this is new concepts for some people. It's also important to identify who will be involved with developing your plan and discussing the components, kind of what goes into an enrollment management plan. So when thinking about enrollment management planning and the admissions recruitment process, I've really found that the funnel theory is kind of a standard theory that's used in undergraduate admissions, and it really provides a nice visual for outlining the admissions recruitment process to faculty and staff. And what we've also found is that there are ways to create special funnels for staff that say, okay, at this point of the admission cycle, this is what you need to be doing. And we've really found that these to be extremely helpful for faculty as well, who are busy with research and teaching and just kind of need that quick refresher every now and then. To simplify the admissions and recruitment process, I kind of talk about it with our programs as to 3 different stages. The pre-application stage, this is the suspects and the prospects are letting you know that they're interested in applying to your program. The in-progress application stage, which is where holistic admissions kind of comes into play, when a prospective student has, for anywhere from started an application to they've submitted it, and now you have to make the decision and let them know the decision, and then admitted student recruitment. I found that in graduate admissions, I found this from the conversations I've had with many of you out there, is that a lot of times in graduate admissions, we haven't really emphasized the pre-application recruitment as much as people have done in undergraduate admissions. So I think adding that top stage really frames how important it is to have the conversations with prospective students earlier on in the recruitment process. So using the NAGAP definition of enrollment management plan, and Sarah, you nailed it, so nothing to worry about there. I found that this definition kind of does a good job of explaining what is enrollment management planning. And thinking about enrollment management planning, the first thing is who's going to be on the team? Who is going to help us create this plan? And we need input from people around the school and university and program. So the first people that you need to kind of get on board are going to be the academic school leaders. And I think right now with the current climate in graduate admissions and graduate schools is that people are definitely in tune with, leaders of programs and schools are in tune with the idea of we need a plan, we need kind of a better way to project and forecast our enrollment as well as retain. So getting school and program leaders is important first step to get their buy-in. Then the next step is getting the right faculty members who are going to be on board with developing an enrollment management plan. So faculty, from my experiences, they tend to respond to hearing concepts and ideas for admissions in recruitment, especially when it pertains to their program. They seem to be more receptive of hearing those ideas from other faculty or seeing that other faculty have kind of bought in. every school and program has a different data team set up, or a different group or office that is in charge of organizing and collecting school and program data. And it's important to make sure that a member of that team is joining your efforts for creating an enrollment management plan, because everybody wants to make their decisions that's based off of data. The finance, accounting, business office, everybody knows, everything from financial aid, funding, as well as tuition revenue are all extremely important to take into consideration. Academic and student affairs, many of us are in academic or student affairs, and we're just, of course, extremely fun, and you wouldn't want to have the party without us. But I think many of us have also stay in tune with recruitment, admissions, and the entire student cycle. Also, thinking about a member of your communication and marketing team, somebody that can help you get that message of what you're trying to deliver to the audience, which is the prospective students, your potential applicants and potential new students. You want to make sure that you're getting that message out there to them as clearly as possible. And it's always important to include people of different identities, because the more perspectives that you can bring to the process, the stronger the process will be. So what goes into an enrollment management plan? I think the most important part is going to be the guiding principles. Why are you doing this? And you can oftentimes pull from a university, school, or program mission statement or mission value to kind of get an idea for, okay, what is our purpose for doing this? Inevitably, at some point, there's going to be a part of the process where you're going to have to, people are going to have lots of different opinions and lots of good conversation, and so you're going to want to be able to go back and say, okay, let's bring everybody back together and let's get recentered. And guiding principles are great ways to kind of make sure everybody stays focused. Evaluate program data. I think it's always important to get not just admissions data, but student success data, retention data, as much data as possible that you can use to help form your enrollment management plan. And then, from that data, being able to try to identify the behavioral trends from students, and then developing strategies to address recruitment for those trends. And then many of you, I think, in admissions, I think this is always kind of the best time of the year, because people come up to you and say, hey, how are numbers looking? Or how many new students are we coming in? It may be the first time that they think about it, but many of us are thinking about it all throughout the admission cycle. And I think it's important to be able to evaluate your enrollment management plan throughout the admission cycle. So thinking about kind of why is holistic admissions important to a holistic application review, important to enrollment management planning, is because you want to be able to connect the application review to the university, school, program mission, to the guiding principles. Being able to say that we are serving the target audience of who we intend to serve, and that we are staying connected with who we are as as higher education universities and colleges. It's also important for kind of thinking about the holistic application review process and with the recruitment effort. When many of us are out on the road this upcoming fall or in the summer, we want to make sure that the information that we are giving to our students, that we're telling the students as we meet them, is accurate to what the admissions process will be. For example, if we're telling students that they will be reviewed with a holistic application review, we need to be able to explain that. If a program uses cutoff scores, which aren't encouraged, we need to be able to be upfront and tell students that there are cutoff scores. I think anything that a student is going to be evaluated on in their application, we need to be able to tell the students that up front. I also think this is important when it comes to our diversity recruitment efforts, and also with just consistent communication. So when thinking about the strategies for in-progress application stage, The strategies that we've used here at UNC Gillings is to have holistic admissions training and to use the data from previous years to kind of guide those conversations. Also training on how to use GRE scores. I know Meghan's going to cover that. And then developing it, we're still tweaking it, but looking at developing and implementing a school and program-wide rubric. Rubrics are extremely important for documenting the different criteria that turns into data from the application. So being able to document all of that information through a rubric is important. Also, implicit bias training. I think that that's one part of the process that we really need our faculty, admissions committee members, staff, everybody can benefit from more implicit bias training. So thinking about kind of the admissions process, and let me see my slide. Oh, there we go. So thinking about the whole process, we outline it, the start of the admission cycle, and then we have kind of the 3 stages. And really that admissions decision, that middle part, is where everything comes together. And kind of that one moment where it comes together is in the admissions decision. And a holistic application review is so important to our planning, our mission, and our ability to achieve our goals in recruitment, admissions, and enrollment. So I'm really excited. If you were not able to hear Meghan's part of the presentation in March, you're in for a treat, because she is very talented and very skilled at explaining holistic admissions, and always learn something from speaking with her.
Oh, thanks so much, Johnston. As you mentioned, at the graduate level, admissions decisions are often made in departments, and that's really the case at Rollins. And I have the pleasure of being on the department side and leading the process from that end of things. Prior to Rollins, I was in undergraduate admissions, and upon coming to Rollins, really saw a lot about our process and an opportunity to apply some best practices from my time at the undergraduate level to the graduate level, particularly in public health. And those best practices, which I'll go through today, are largely what I've come to define as holistic admission. I saw it as not only the right thing to do when we consider the immense amount of trust applicants put in us to act responsibly with their information, but also a way to ensure we're doing our part to meet the challenging enrollment targets, all while ensuring the diversity of our class from multiple perspectives. Just wait for my slide here. So talking a little bit of why review applications holistically. I mentioned it's the right thing to do, but why is it the right thing to do? Well, if you were to ask most people what they expect of an admissions committee, the answer is likely to be that the committee should be fair. And if you follow that up with, well, what does it mean to be fair? Most people will say the committee should just treat everybody the same. However, I would say, wouldn't it be inherently unfair to treat everyone the same when access, opportunities, and experiences vary so greatly, more often than not due to factors outside of an applicant's control? And that is why viewing an applicant in the context of their individual situation and taking into consideration all parts of an application when making a decision is so important, and building a class that's not only expected to learn from the faculty, but also each other. Okay, so great. Before we really start to go into all the different pieces of holistic admission and going through the application, but just really quickly, what is consistent in an application? Of course, personal information, testing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, a student's transcript, their resume or CV, personal statement, and letters of recommendation. So thinking about testing, our department requires either a GRE or an MCAT score unless an applicant has previously earned a master's degree or a PhD, and we'll consider other advanced degree programs and testing on a case-by-case basis. However, the vast majority of applicants to our program submit GRE scores from at least one sitting. And the infographic on this slide and the line below it are actually taken directly from the ETS website. And to be totally honest, when I first came into the graduate world and admissions, I saw the GRE being used in a way that the ETS would not necessarily support. ETS says cutoff scores should never be used, and actually shares on their website that 2 limitations of the GRE are, 1, that it's an inexact measure, and 2, that it cannot measure the qualities that are important in predicting success or confirm undergraduate achievement for us. And I'll talk more about the qualities that I look for to predict success in the next slide, but I think it's really important that we think about the fact that ETS says that the GRE cannot confirm undergraduate achievement. Too often, I've seen reviewers overlook a solid transcript, supportive letters of recommendation, and a decent personal statement because the GRE was simply too low. As ETS tells us, a test sitting cannot serve to confirm a 4-year academic record for us. And as a committee on the admission side, we find testing to be useful when it is used as it should be as part of a multiple criteria policy that ensures inclusiveness. And as a side note, before moving on, please keep in mind that ETS strongly encourages reviewers to look at percentiles rather than the raw scores. And I do also point out that there's a lot of great information and strategies available on the website, holisticadmissions.org, which is a research effort between ETS and the GRE program. So in our department, we focus on our review on 4 different categories, and those would be academic, experience, letters of recommendation, and fit with program or otherwise personal qualities. So starting with applicants, I think most of us can agree that GPA and testing is a really good starting point. However, we cannot just see those 2 things and stop, especially if our gut reaction is to say no. We like to ask ourselves, what type of institution did the student attend? Is it one known not to inflate grades? We know at Rollins we're fortunate enough to have the resources to provide a significant amount of support, and it's very difficult to fall through the cracks. So we asked ourselves, did that student attend a large school? Was it possible that they got lost? And another question we asked ourselves is, what was the student's major? And when we ask ourselves that question, it's all too clear that GPA is just the tip of the iceberg. In our department, we have anything from biology majors to film majors and everything in between. And we also have a lot of students who knew they wanted health and to help people and picked a major that allowed them to easily fulfill pre-med requirements, and it simply did not go well. But when pre-med wasn't working out, what did they earn in courses such as statistics, research methods, courses that we know are greater predictors of success in our department than organic chemistry may be? Also, we think about grade trend. We know high school to college is a major transition. Did they have a shaky transition, but an upward trend? I think of an applicant we admitted for the fall of 2018 who shared with us that she came from a very rural town in Texas. It was at the top of her high school class and could never imagine failing. It simply was not who she was, and she got to college and failed. She felt ill-prepared by her low-resource high school for a lot of the lab sciences at the next level. However, once she gained her footing, there was evidence of an upward trend, especially in the coursework that we'd find particularly compelling, going back, research methods, statistics, and so forth. And so we offered her admission not only because we think she can find success, but also because we think she'll add to the rich exchange of ideas that we all hope to cultivate in our communities, especially in public health. And I just want to point out, in our department, we have a lot of conversations about interventions for low-resource areas. And if we don't invite these students in or we continue to put up hurdles, we'll always have that us and them dynamic. So moving on from academic and focusing on the experience end of it, in our department, we don't have a specific work experience requirement, but we do look to see if an applicant has touched public health in some way. However, one thing we really try to be mindful was the level of experience impacted by circumstances, especially for our students who are either first-generation college, underrepresented, and or low income. We need to be mindful that applicants from some of these groups may not have the network or financial means to have the most unbelievable public health experiences, especially if they're coming straight from undergrad or a couple years out. And when I think about this, I think a lot about the summer. For example, summer research, summer internships in and out of the country are often unpaid. So be mindful of this. And another thing we look for, has the student been part of a national program that's already recognized certain qualities? For example, we'll often see students who are either Posse, Questbridge, or Gates Scholars in college. Those are all very highly selective programs, but different, and I'll go through what they all mean. And when a student earns one of these scholarships, it tells us something, and especially in the case of Gates, it tells us something, but also it provides funding for the next level. And to go through really briefly, if you see a posse student, those students are selected for leadership ability and overall motivation to succeed. On college campuses, they are part of a small group that gets to know each other prior to entering college. And what being a member of that group tells us is they were identified as academically motivated and have been trained in leadership and community engagement for over 4 years. This is likely someone we want in our school and in our program community. Talking about QuestBridge, it's a highly competitive match program that exists to increase access to education across the socioeconomic spectrum. Those students have achieved at the highest levels in high school and have come from families who have faced significant financial hardship. Family incomes of $65,000 or less for a family of 4. And when a student comes to us as a QuestBridge scholar, we know not only that they are smart, but also they have a significant amount of determination or grit. Not only because of their personal circumstances, but QuestBridge students go on to the nation's most selective institutions. And if they're applying to graduate school, we know that they persisted. And like Posse and QuestBridge, the Gates Scholar Program is highly selective. Its goal is to promote academic excellence and provide an opportunity for outstanding minority students with significant financial need to reach their highest potential. And part of the mission of Gates is to increase representation in several academic disciplines, including public health. And as a result, these students are also eligible to obtain not only undergraduate funding, but also graduate school funding, which means that we have a high chance when we think about back to enrollment management of yielding that student, because it's not unlikely that we will not yield the student due to funding. And another program I like to pay close attention to is the McNair program, because it tells us that the student is from a disadvantaged background and has demonstrated strong academic potential at the college level. McNair is a TRIO program, and institutions are awarded funding on a competitive grant basis to support students with the ultimate goal of attaining a PhD. And we also know that if a student identifies as having participated in the McNair program, that they've been given opportunities for research and other scholarly activities. And another thing we're looking at are the letters of recommendation. Who is writing on the student's behalf, and what are they saying? The vast majority of recommendations are standardly supportive, but it's important that we're looking for the letters to tell us more. Often, if we're having concerns about the ability to be successful, we're looking to see if there's indication of grit or resilience. Essentially, can the student face obstacles, push through, and find success? It says a lot about a person if a faculty member or supervisor says something happened, I wasn't sure if they would be successful, however they learned from it, asked for help, and found success. Speaking of grit, in reviewing MPH applications, we have one of the most ultimate signs of grit, a 4-year degree. I think it's often easy to forget in academic settings, but just 1 in 3 adults hold a bachelor's degree, and that number significantly drops for underrepresented populations. And when I think of grit, especially in reviewing applications, I also think of those students that come to us having first earned an associate's degree at community college. Often in our experience, we find that they come from underfunded high schools and find their way through obstacles such as non-credit bearing math. And as a result, we know the pipeline is even more complicated for those students. So if they can make their way through the 2-year transfer and the 4-year college transfer, that's really a really good indicator of grit. And when we think about applications to an MPH program. And finally, we're looking at personal qualities that might add value to the class in the essay. Thinking about the essay, what is the applicant writing about? Is it clear that the goals mesh well with MPH? And does the applicant have a good grasp on our institution and our department? A student who's done their research and wants to be here is more apt to do well. And of course, we're looking at the quality of writing in the personal statement. But if we're concerned about writing because maybe the writing score is low, the personal statement is not actually the only section to look at for quality. Because if you're going to have somebody proofread a section of your application, it's most likely to be the personal statement. If I have any concerns about writing, I'm not only going to look there, but I'm also going to look at the other sections of the application to really see the true quality of writing, even thinking about things such as the resume and so forth, to really get a gauge of the actual writing of the student. So I thought it was important to show a case in which we put all these items into practice. So what you're seeing here is an actual applicant to the Rollins School of Public Health and the Department of Behavioral Sciences and Health Education, and their GRE scores. This person scored a 54 percentile in verbal, a 38 percentile in writing, and a 15% in the quantitative section. I highlight the quantitative section because, prior to us really embracing the holistic review, the 15% would have been the kiss of death. But here are some other things we looked at beyond the GRE. So this is this person's transcript. So essentially what you're seeing, A's, B's, some evidence of an upward trend, but kind of looking at those courses that are particularly relate to our field and looking and seeing a student received a B- in statistics, an A in research and psychology. We really see that this student could likely perform well in our program. And other things we looked at, generally in looking at this person's personal statement, it was well written. For example, it had good structure, it was free of or had minimal errors. The essay also had some really important themes that we, in our department, such as the built environment, median health, and then also a real fit for our institution. This person has done their research, wants to be here. Noted things such as opportunities for hands-on learning, a certificate program we have, and our location. And another thing, indication of future success. I see worked with advisors to design an experiment that would expand upon previous qualitative research. This is a line this person wrote in their application. And one thing I do want to highlight is advisors. So this person has people that are going to support them along the journey to the MPH, which is important, in previous qualitative research experience. So this person's touched public health in some way. Another line in the application, implementing changes and designing interventions that are specific to underserved communities. Interventions, underserved communities, those are all big parts of what we do. So before we move into questions, I just want to share, so what happened with the student? The student applied in 2015. The student graduated on time in 2017, completed a thesis, and actually now works as a data scientist at one of the major consulting firms. And I also want to note that this student not only found success, they graduated with a 3.89 GPA, and the average GPA for graduating students in that cohort was a 3.44. So we're so glad that we admitted this student, that we can say that they're a Rollins alum, and that the testing did not prevent us from admitting the student. And so just some questions to think about and end on. What does holistic admissions mean to you? Do you have any additional questions? We're happy to answer those. And also sharing with the group what resources or training do you think will help your admissions committees? And our contact information is right there if we can be of any assistance. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and Erin for questions.
Wonderful. And before I turn it, thank you all. Thank you, Erin, Johnson, and Megan. Before I turn it back over to Erin, I did want to remind everyone that you can submit questions to the question box, and we will address them now. The first one, someone did ask, would it be possible to receive examples of rubrics used by other programs or schools? Is there a place where these can be found, or?
Yeah, we have. This is Johnston, and if you email me, and I'd be more than happy to send you the rubric that we're working on for our MPH program. So I'd be more than happy to send that to you.
Great. I'll also share. At this time, we're all our departments at Rollins are working on, read separately and have different process for doing so. But in our department, we generally have a rubric that reflects back on all of those all those different items such as personal fit, academic, and so forth on a 1 to 5 ranking, and then an overall ranking that just kind of takes into consideration everything.
At Texas A&M, we do something very similar to what Megan just described, and we use the assignments form in WebInit to document that internally with our faculty reviewers and our program directors or department heads, so I'm happy to share that as well.
Wonderful. The next question asks, they are interested in knowing who sits on your admissions committees.
Sure. At Rollins, it differs from department to department, but in our department, most of the decisions are largely made by myself, but we also have a director of graduate studies who is the person that wears the public health hat in terms of student services in the department. And if we have a particularly difficult case, we'll bring it to what we have called for our department admissions committee, which consists of myself, another advisor, and our director of graduate studies. And we actually, vote on the student, talk about the concerns, talk about the positive aspects of the application.
Here at Gillings, similar, every department has their own different process and different committee. I think for the most part, programs have 2 reviewers that start out to read the application, and then those reviewers will present the applicant to the committee, and the committee does meet multiple times throughout the admission cycle. And at that point, the reviewers and admissions committees are mostly faculty. There may be an occasional staff member who's part of the admissions committees. But at that point, if there are any questions about an applicant, that's where the review committees will have that conversation, and also just kind of talk about the shaping of the class and how the class is coming together with seat capacity, and kind of decide on all those enrollment management functions of filling the class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at Texas A&M, we do a preliminary review in my office where we check that the applicant meets the school minimum requirements, and then for some of our programs we have expedited review processes based on if the applicant fits particular criteria. But then beyond that, it will go to the department, and that also would have minimum 2 faculty reviewers, and then either the program chair or department head providing a recommendation for admission decision. We have a secondary process that if we see an applicant who is denied with over a 3.0 or accepted below a 3.0, that we look at those a little bit further, particularly those that are denied, because we want to make sure that we've trained our faculty well on, not denying an applicant based on GRE, or a special consideration should be given to, a URM student or a first-generation student given maybe lower standardized test scores. Very similar to things that Meghan touched on. And then at that point, we'll do an admission decision.
Thank you all. Go ahead, Jonathan.
And I remember from our discussion back in March at this presentation, a big hot topic among the audience was time to decision. And I think that's something a lot of programs were trying to emphasize more for those students that are clear admits, how to expedite and speed up their application review so that they can get the decision to those top students sooner than later.
Right. And if we get the decision to the top students earlier, it gives us some time to really discuss the students that we may need to actually spend extra time on, and give us the time to spend on them.
Great, thank you all. The next question asks, can you talk about ways that you administer admissions committees, trainings and or materials provided that keep all faculty on the same page during the process?
Well, I think that's kind of what we're looking at developing right now this summer here at Gillings, is working with our associate dean of diversity and inclusion, and trying to identify what are the best implicit bias trainings and just diversity including trainings throughout the year that she's going to host, and including admissions related topics that, during the appropriate times of the year when we receive the most amount of applications. I think what we have found is that people are interested in it and people are actively looking for it, but we want to make sure here at Gillings, instead of recreating the same training session 10 times, that we're effectively scheduling it, as well as making sure it's impactful and useful for faculty So I think that's kind of what we're looking at designing right now. But I know also within the committees, and it sounds like Meghan probably does a good job of this, of having those conversations. And I think some of it seems to be experiential learning, and just that's what kind of jumps out to me.
Right. A lot of what I've seen is especially faculty are in roles, and they've not necessarily had the opportunity to review applications before, so they're not necessarily familiar with what are typical best practices one comes upon just having been in higher ed, for years. And so I found them to be, very open to some of those best practices and suggestions, and kind of going over, a lot of the pieces I brought up in my presentation, kind of explaining how experience can be very much impacted by socioeconomic status rather than skill level. They're very receptive to that.
Yeah, and for A&M, we're working with our climate and diversity dean to get some additional training to our faculty. Historically, we've always published competitive GPA and GRE reports for each concentration that we offer back to our faculty reviewers, so they at least have a better benchmark of where their faculty peers are also reviewing the applications, and then we push out best practices and percentiles based on that. So that's something else to consider. I'm going to go ahead and put a plug in for Emily Burke. She's been doing a phenomenal job compiling application data in the data center. And she's also working on a report that will better establish acceptance rates and yield rates. So if that's something you're interested in, I totally recommend reaching out to her, and she can help provide that data for your program as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. She is doing an awesome job with those reports.
Yeah.
And Emily would be glad to hear from anyone and help you all. Great, thank you. The next question asks, you have all mentioned implicit bias. How does each of your institutions approach sensitizing committee members to their implicit biases? Are there particular trainings that you're using, or what is your process?
I'll jump in first. For A&M, we're still working on kind of best defining how that fits our program and addressing that with our faculty. So it's something that I brought up with the dean, that we have an annual retreat every summer that includes faculty and staff, and then there's one session just for faculty coming up that we'll talk about. At the ASPPH Leaders Retreat that just happened, there was an individual that spoke, Marian Vassar, Dr. Vassar. She's Director for Diversity, Education, Inclusive Excellence with University of Louisville, who was absolutely phenomenal on talking about implicit bias, just as ourselves as our own individuals, but how that translates into the application process. I know she would be a great resource for many of you, but absolutely utilize those types of individuals at your university who are in that role, because for us it was something that was an assumption, thinking that our faculty reviewers were being cognizant of that, but seeing some particular trends with some programs versus others, we're taking a more active role in including our climate and diversity dean into those conversations. And they're really well trained on how to approach faculty in general about implicit bias, and we then bridge that gap down to how that works with admissions.
And I'll also jump in as well. Like Erin, it's I think something Rollins is still working on. But in my past experiences, typically there's a reading retreat prior to going into application review every year, and part of that reading retreat is an implicit bias training in which an expert in that field will come to present to everyone that is reviewing applications, and that's a major component of reading training each year. And one thing I always have found helpful is that it's important to note that implicit bias training is not a one and done. You don't do it 1 year and then you kind of say it's okay to do it every other year or every 3 years. It's important to do it every year and to remind any reader that there's something to constantly be cognizant about, and to do that training every year.
Mm-hmm.
So our Associate Dean of Diversity and Inclusion, she just started in February, and she's already given her first presentation at a staff meeting about implicit bias with another faculty member. And then I think they're also planning to do it at a faculty and staff meeting. And similar to what Meghan was talking about, it's not you go to one presentation and you're trained. I think that's what we're kind of looking at is with our enrollment management planning group, is figuring out how to weave in her training, diversity inclusion training and implicit bias training throughout the year into making sure that we're addressing it consistently, and that it's not just well, we did it, check it off the box, we're good to go.
Great, thank you. The next question, a few actually, are schools of public health moving away from the GRE requirement, or have any of your schools considered eliminating GRE as a requirement?
Sure. At this point in our department, it's not something that we're considering for applicants that don't already hold a master's or a PhD. I do still find value in testing, but I think it's important that we really consider it as one piece of the puzzle and not just the trunk piece. I think it's important that we really consider it as a piece of the puzzle and really use it as ETS strongly suggests that we do, which is part of a multiple criteria policy. I think what I find particularly frustrating is when sometimes reviewers are very quick to dismiss 4 years of solid work over a test score. So it's really important that we really utilize how UTS says we should, which is part of a multiple criteria.
I think that I like to look at it from the perspective of let's heighten the awareness of the other attributes and start having more in-depth discussions about the experience, the recommendations, personal statements, looking beyond the GPA into what courses. We're not at a point right now, and I don't know even who would make that decision of going completely GRE free, but that doesn't mean that that we should just completely not have those important conversations. But it goes back to kind of heightening the awareness of the other components that Meghan was talking about.
I totally agree with both Meghan and Johnston. This is one of the reports we are going to run this summer, looking at GPA and GRE, and then any other factors that we deem relevant for the application process, and see if we can find any correlative data between GPA and GRE or any other indicators. So for us, it's something that we're exploring this summer, but it would be given really strict criteria if we do go down that road.
Thank you. The next question is, this person oversees admissions for programs with several hundred applications each year and is looking for ideas as to how to scale the holistic admissions process to reduce burden on faculty reviewers.
Sure. I would say, depending on the selectivity of your program, but if there are students that are always going to be admitted, to your program, and who those people are, of course you have to read their applications to look for any red flags, but I'd say, kind of going back to Johnston's time to decision, going ahead in admitting those people short of any red flags, especially if they're going to be admitted anyways, and really spending that time, whether it's through admissions committee or what have you, really saving that time for applicants, and really where you're going to have to read every letter of recommendation. You're going to have to read the personal statement. If there's any concerns about writing, really go through the rest of the application and spending time where the time you spend it, and not really spending the time where the end result anyways.
I think now is the best time of the year for programs to look at, setting up their strategies for reviewing applications right now, and making sure that everybody's on the same page going into the application season, because we all know once the academic year starts, and then you get into exams and just in November, December, and then vacation time, people don't have as much time to kind of go back to their basics and kind of set those priorities right now and the expectations for what do you want your committees to look at. So I think establishing that, and kind of for faculty, we really find it helpful to have it direct as possible in kind of in a document form where they can pick it up and say, okay, it's that brief refresher of this is what we discussed, this is our plan, so that they can go back to it. But to do a majority of the heavy lifting right now and not try to do it in the middle of the year.
Great. Thank you for those tips. This person says that they went through a 6-month process to get buy-in from faculty on holistic admissions. Can you share your process for getting faculty on board for this holistic admissions process?
Well, I know for us, it's a constant dialogue. I mean, I think that for us, I wouldn't say that we are completely there yet. I think people know the term. I think most people are on board, but we still have some that just are not as aware of it. And what holistic admissions it is. They know it as kind of like a buzzword. But I think it's just constant, it's a constant dialogue, and for some people will jump right on it, and then for other people it may take more time. I mean, I think that with public health faculty and within the field of public health, that if we can frame it within the context of, we're training students on how to, be fair and equitable towards people, and that, one way for us to demonstrate that is in our admissions practices.
Right. I like Jocelyn said, I think it's a constant conversation. Even when we started to do a full holistic review of every applicant, a few years ago in my department at Rollins, I wouldn't, total faculty buy-in, I think, is unrealistic, but we did have buy-in from the departmental leadership in moving forward. So as students who we've had larger conversations about have joined our class, and they've been showing success at the same rates of students that were typically admitted under the typical, what is their GRE score, what's their GPA, and what's their major. And, and after we've seen those students gain success, we continually have more and more buy-in.
Yeah, and I think they both touched on really good points as far as it is a constant dialogue, but having the support of your leadership, like Meghan said too, is totally invaluable. I mean, without the backing of our dean, we'd have departments going totally different directions on how they feel the review process should go. And I think sharing those success stories, like Meghan shared earlier, of, it's not a one-size-fits-all, but for us being, very data-driven at the same time to look at, okay, well, what are indicators in the application that may show signs related to our retention rates or our probation? That may help with that conversation with your faculty to be able to show, a lower percentile in GRE isn't the end all be all, that we can look at these other factors as well.
Fantastic, thank you. The next question, we have a few more minutes. Asks for optimally to apply holistic admissions, would be best to limit the faculty reviewer pool number. For example, as in, is it easier to implement quality control with fewer faculty member involved in the process?
I think it's a balance, because I think with holistic reviews, sometimes the more set of eyes, the better. But if you're going to have more set of eyes, it's important that they're all trained to review applications, because our students are really sharing their stories. And I always say, if they're sharing our stories, we really have to be prepared to receive them. In our department, explicitly we've kind of dialed back on the faculty involvement in application review, because I've really managed a lot of it, but I don't necessarily think that is the only way to go.
Okay.
I agree with Meghan. It goes back to that training and making sure that the eyes that are reviewing the applications are trained. So.
Great. Thank you. All right. This question asks, how do you differentiate students with undergraduate degrees in public health in your processes? Or more specifically, is there any consideration given to an undergraduate background in public health that you can articulate?
I would say that it's not necessarily the major I'm looking at, more so rather than the coursework. So if they've taken similar courses to what they're going to take in our program and had success in those courses, generally that's a student who's going to do well. Also, with a student that major in undergraduate public health, they usually have public health experiences, so we consider it in that regard, but it's not so much that we're separating out students who receive an undergraduate degree in public health versus those who did not. We're really like any student looking at the coursework, looking at experiences and abilities to be successful in the field.
I agree. It's so the major is kind of one part of it, but what did the student do while pursuing the degree? Did volunteer work? If the student has a gap between undergraduate and attending a graduate program, how have they gotten involved with public health? I think just being able to say, oh, you have a undergraduate degree in public health, that's a piece of the puzzle, but being able to demonstrate your interest in the field that you're applying to beyond just a degree is important as well.
Totally agree.
Wonderful. Do you have different measures of holistic review for students who did their previous degree work outside of the U.S. or Canada?
So we asked for the WES course by course evaluation in terms of transfer or not transfer, but in terms of course, looking at the students' courses. But otherwise, it's a very similar process. We're looking at testing as well as coursework, as well as personal statements and letters of recommendation. The only thing that's different that we're going to ask for is that course by course evaluation.
Same here.
Yeah, and we do the same with using the WES and then the English language proficiency, just making sure they meet our minimum as well.
Right.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, we have addressed all of the questions that have come in via the question box. Did you all have any closing statements or thoughts that you'd like to share with the attendees?
Take advantage of the next few weeks while things hopefully slow. I mean, put things in place now, because we all know once August, September comes around, it'll be January before we know it. So
Exactly.
I think make the most out of this time right now to put your training in place.
Yeah, I'm convinced it's August already.
Oh gosh, no. All right. Well, thank you all for your thoughtful presentations today and for sharing all the great work that you're doing at your respective institutions. Your contact information is displayed on the screen now for anyone who would like to follow up with you. And just so everyone knows that the webinar has been recorded and it will be available on the ASPPH website in the near future. You will all get an email on Friday letting you know that it is available along with the PDF of the slides. And also, please consider attending future ASPPH Presents webinars. The next one is on your screen, and there will be others. So thanks again to Erin, Johnson, and Megan. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.